Good evening, everyone, and welcome to SocialFlight Live. I'm Jeff Simon. We have a wonderful show for you this evening. Melvin Williams is here, Boeing 737 educator, aircraft mechanic, pilot, CFI, and so much more. And I cannot wait to get to him to join the program. Before we get started, of course, a few things about what's going on. First of all, SocialFlight's Fly to Win Challenge is in its last day for this cycle, and we are giving away a Lightspeed Zulu 3 headset. It's going to be chosen by the end of the day tomorrow. So September 1st, be sure to get in there, and you still have time to get out there and check in at any airport. Just get the free SocialFlight app on your phone for Apple or Android devices. All you have to do is go to the challenge tab and check in at any airport. If you check in at many airports, you can compete to get more entries, but even one gets you in to win that prize. And then, of course, moving forward after this, every single time that you can look down at your phone, we have a challenge going on for a new prize, and we'll be announcing that prize after we announce the winner of our Lightspeed Zulu 3. So be sure to check out again socialflight.com. We have tens of thousands of aviation events and destinations, online events and in-person events, and it is just so important right now to support local airports, to support clubs, EAA chapters, Fly-In, Pancake Breakfast, Young Eagles, you name it. Go on there and you can find out what's happening local to you, and you can get out there and support it. And the last thing is I am so excited to announce those of you listening now on our SocialFlight Live podcast. It's available on whatever streaming service that you use. Just do a search on SocialFlight. It's one word, and it'll bring up our new podcast, and it has some great things. We come out with a new episode every Thursday and a throwback episode every Sunday with some of the best things and people that we have had on. And I'll tell you, it's been a wild ride, and I'd encourage you to go check it out and enjoy your time in the car like you haven't before, if that's where you listen to your podcast. Now, our guest tonight is a Boeing 737 educator, mechanic, aerobatic pilot, and CFI. Melvin Williams has had his hand in many facets of aviation. Through his Instagram channel and other media, Mel inspires, motivates, and mentors young people to focus on their dreams and work hard to achieve them. It's a message that's getting through loud and clear. With over 40,000 followers on Instagram, Mel sharing his story of perseverance and diversity in aviation to young people who may never have seen, let alone set foot on a General Aviation airport. Mel's passion for professionalism and expanding his own boundaries has led him into aerobatics and put him on the road to future airshow fame. I'm going to bring Mel on the line now, and I'm thrilled to have him here with us tonight on SocialFlight Live. Please welcome Melvin Williams. How are you doing tonight, Mel?
What's going on, Jeff? What's up, man? I'm good. Happy to hang out.
Thank you so much for joining us. I have to tell you, sometimes with guests, I'm a little bit of a kid in watching this, and I love what you're doing. I didn't grow up in an aviation family or in any exposure to it. And when there is someone that opens the doors to people and just brings them in from outside of aviation like you do, it just puts a grin on my face I can't get over.
Yeah, man. It's surreal. I'm really happy to be here. I really honestly didn't see my aviation career going this far in the beginning, but here I am. So
So let's start as we talk about you being here. I want to, get to some of the things that, of course, you're doing now, but I'd like to start with a bit of your foundation of how you got into aviation, and then take us kind of behind the scenes a little bit on this Boeing 737 work that you do.
yeah. So wow. It's been a little bit. So I was fortunate enough to get my aviation career started by going to aviation high school in New York City, in Long Island City, Queens, New York. And aviation high school is basically it's a vocational school. So you do the whole high school thing, but then you also take shop classes. And basically the end result is, as long as you follow the curriculum, you'll get your airframe and power plant license. So I did 5 years of high school. Not 4, and not for the wrong reasons, but for the right ones, right? And yeah, so after 4 years, I got my airframe, and then they have a 5th-year program that you have to apply for because they can't take everybody. They can't take the entire senior class. You have to apply, and they got to have the right scores and all other stuff. So I came back to high school for a 5th year so I can get my power plant license. And yeah, I was certified by 18 years old when I graduated. I have a late birthday. I turned 19, in November at the time, but when I took my practical exam, I was 18 with my airframe and power plant licenses. So.
Wow. So in 4 years, they focus on airframe mainly, and the fifth year is power plant if you come back for that?
Well, it depends. So everybody starts basically the same, and then I believe it's your junior year you focus on either airframe or power plant. So I had airframe first my junior year, so I came back for power plant, whereas others would who started off in the power plant realm would come back for the airframe. So
Right.
it just yeah.
I think a lot of people outside of aviation don't necessarily realize that when we call someone an A and P, that those are separate, really, ratings as part of a license. You can be
Yep.
either, not just together. There's such thing as an A or a P.
Correct. Yeah. There is. Of course, the airframe side of it is, everything else other than the engine, right? And then you have the engine side of it. So yeah, I mean, you have folks that just have their airframe and they do, welding stuff and machine type stuff, and you have folks that just have their power plant and just focus on engines. So, but of
Wow.
course, it's better to get both. Better to get both. Better, well-rounded. Mine as well. You're already in it. So, but yes, yeah. You can be separate. Mhm.
I think those vocational programs are so important. There's a great one that's at our local airport up here, and I see the enthusiasm and kind of the culture of what's going on. And we need mechanics. We need people in so many of these trades, and they have such incredibly bright futures. That seems to be an area that could use a lot more focus in terms of both diversity and outreach for aviation.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I tell people all the time, my high school saved my life because, I don't like saying it often because, people take it the wrong way, but I didn't like school growing up. Not because I just didn't get it. I mean, I got it. I just didn't see the point of a lot of it until, I got to my school and I said, okay, well, there's something here because when I leave, it's not just kind of going through what everybody else goes through. Okay, you go to elementary school and you go to high school and then you graduate, then you have to figure out what you want to do with your life, and then you go to college and then you spend more money, and then you know what I mean, it just keeps going and going and going. And people get to college. I have friends that change their majors a whole bunch of times and all this other stuff, still trying to figure it out. But when I was in high school, I said, this is something here, because I was seeing folks, who were older than me graduate and go on and work for the airlines. It was a direct, move from high school straight into the workforce. So it made sense. So, I wasn't an A student. I wasn't a B student, C minus maybe at best, but that was in the academic realm. But in shop, I excelled because that's what was going to, put money in my pocket, what was going to put a roof over my head and stuff like that in the future. And
Mhm.
that's really what I focused on. So my approach to things a little bit different. I just focused on, at the time, what was more important, and to me personally, it was shop classes and doing that stuff, because I knew at that point in time, if I could do that and excel in that, then there was a job waiting for me. And I mean, I was absolutely correct. And I Delta picked me up at 19, and here I am 15 years later, at 34. So it worked.
Wow. What drew you, given that you kind of were drawn towards the trades and you excelled at that? There's so many different things. It's so easy to go down one of those tracks that's not in aviation, of course. What drew you to the aviation side of it?
Man, I've always been into airplanes, just from a kid. My grandfather used to go on a lot of work trips. He worked for a bank. He was a bank manager as I was growing up, and he would be in and out grabbing his bags. Sometimes you could smell the jet fuel on his clothes as he came in. And then my aunt used to take me out to JFK, and this is before 9/11, where they're sending you around, you got to keep going, you know what I mean? So you can actually just park up, at the departures, and I can, see all the airplanes when the Concorde was still flying and stuff like that. So I've always been interested in aviation. So when I went to my high school, originally when I applied, I actually thought it was to become a pilot, until I got there and I'm seeing a whole bunch of engines taken apart. I'm like, man, what the hell is this, And come to find out, it's a aviation maintenance school. I'm like, oh, well, I guess that's like the next best thing. So it worked out. And then, on top of that, it's vocation, learning a trade is super important, just as important as, becoming a doctor, a lawyer, all the other stuff, and it's just a different angle. It's not the ordinary. A lot of people get pressure to go and, do these spectacular things, but, a lot of folks don't realize you can do spectacular things different ways, so.
That makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. One of the things, again, of course, I'm a big fan of the trades and how they all, how much we need them in society. And one of the things I love about it in aviation is it's such a kind of, it's managed so professionally, and it's such a seamless path between those that get involved and may only work on airplanes to those who work on them and fly them. And it seems so upwardly mobile. You mentioned you wind up working for Fortune 500 companies if that's what you choose to do. Like the paths are really open. You can choose to have your own local business and hang your own shingle, or you can choose to work for a large company, and who knows, you could rise anywhere in the ranks there is.
Right.
So tell me a little bit more about your path when you got out and how you wound up where you are today, because of course you work for one of the large airlines.
Yeah, so what happened was I actually went on to college. I went to Dowling College for a semester. It was very odd. So I went there and I had a work study job, believe it or not, working on their flight school airplane. So Dowling College is a flight school in Long Island. It's no longer, they closed the doors, and so it doesn't exist anymore. But I was there working as a technician for their Piper Warrior 3s and stuff like that, and doing the whole AMP thing, which was cool. But it was so interesting because I was getting work study pay. And I was making the same money that the library, attendant was making, basically. Yeah, it was odd because they couldn't hire me as a college employee, so it had to fall under work study. So it was a weird deal. So anyway, fast forward, what happened was one day during the semester, it was the fall semester of 2006, I went back to my dorm room and sat on the computer. I had to type a paper or whatever, and I said, you know what, let me see what jobs are available out there for me. I was just kind of fishing around, went JetBlue and Delta and Southwest and United and Continental at the time, so I just looked to see what was out there, and I just shot my resume out to everyone, and I didn't hear anything back. And I said, of course not. They're not going to hire an 18, 19-year-old. It doesn't make any sense, And then 4 weeks later, I got a call and an email from Delta saying, you applied. Come on down, take the test. And I took the test thinking I failed it because so the funny thing was I was late to the test, right? So I get there late. The guy's like, oh man, you only got like a half hour left, just kind of figure it out. So, this is before all this electronic stuff and all this internet tests that they're doing. So it was actually a Scantron. And I sat down and I got there late, but I was one of the first people to finish. I thought I completely bombed it. And so I walked out of there like, yeah, this isn't gonna work out. Whatever, back to school I go. And I was called out of the room and they said, well, you passed. And do you want to do the interview now? I said, well, okay, yeah, sure. So I had a face-to-face interview with a guy named Tom Harper, who was the maintenance guy at Delta at JFK at the time, and he hired me on the spot. And I started off in Department 206, which is cabin maintenance. So that's fixing tray tables and stuff like that, just to get my feet wet, just to learn the logbook and sign-offs and to get familiar with the operation. And then 5 months after that, I went into line maintenance, and there I am, 19 years old, fixing engines and being out there in the cold and talking to flight crews, and they say, yeah, I got this weird light, can you help me out? I'm like, all right, I'll figure it out, and it was the best. I couldn't believe it. I still can't believe it. I mean, at that point, being 19 years old, I got to travel the world for free and get on standby everywhere. But still, I didn't have to pay for any flights, and it was cool living in my mom's basement. It was awesome, man. And then here I am, fast forward to now. Now I'm teaching. Now I still travel, but I travel for work. I teach classes all around military bases and, different airports and stuff, and, teaching people about the 737. So it's really crazy because, the irony is, I, for someone who, grew up not seeing the full point of school, of course there's a point in school, but like, a lot of stuff to me didn't matter. Like, why am I even studying this stuff? To now becoming an instructor of something is like absolutely insane to me. Like every day I wake up and I suit up for work, I'm like, how the hell am I teaching airplanes?
Isn't that wonderful? You're the teacher now.
Yeah, exactly. I guess I'll just roll with it. So it's really crazy how it came back to kind of slap me in my face, but in a good way. So it's cool.
So, I mean, that is absolutely fascinating, and I love that there is such a unique path to spread the message around. And you probably do make the best teacher, having been probably, from what you're describing, a fairly reluctant student.
Yeah, I just try to make stuff simple, just because that's how I am. A lot of people have these crazy theories and stuff like that, but if you study it enough, I mean, you can really dumb it down to really dumb it down and dumb it down again, where it's like, hey, it's really not that big of a deal. This is what's going on here.
But
And
you
that's
glossed over very quickly the first thing, which is if you study it enough,
yeah,
then
that's true.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
true.
you did say that. Then you can make it simple for others.
Right, right, yeah, yeah. So I mean, it's a good gig. I enjoy it. It's a great schedule, holidays off, weekends off, Monday through Friday. It's nice. I honestly can't complain. I tell people all the time I have the best job in the world. I can't believe Delta pays me to talk all day. I still it still doesn't make any sense. It still doesn't make any sense, but I'm here, man. I'm here, and it's
You're
yeah,
going to
I'm
wind up being a mechanic that doesn't have back issues and carpal tunnel syndrome at this rate. What's
telling
going
you.
on?
Yeah, because being out there, in the cold, in the heat, I mean, eventually it just takes a toll on you. I mean, lifting stuff, and it's great, but it does take a toll on you. So, I've kind of bought myself a little bit of longevity here. So,
So I'd like to learn a little bit more about your role because it's fascinating to me, and I think a lot of people who fly airlines, which is everyone, um, always wants to know what's going on behind the scenes here with line service. When we're talking, if your aircraft is getting delayed, if there's some issue going on, these are the folks that you teach with the 737, right? That are solving problems with an aircraft at the gate, let's say.
mhm. Yeah. So, of course, the biggest thing is safety. Safety is number one. But at the same time, you got to try to minimize the time that you're taking to, solve whatever problem you may have, because people have connections, people have, weddings to go to, funerals, unfortunately, to attend, and birthday parties or whatever. There's so many different, things that, people have to get to. But, solving a problem, the good thing is there is a book that we can use depending on what's broken. We may be able to basically acknowledge that it's broken and let the flight crew know that it's broken, and that book will give us allowable limits and stuff to operate the aircraft safely, as long as certain safety precautions and certain things are done in order to do so. But at the same time, there's certain things that are not in that book, and if it's not in that book, then you can't basically MEL it, and
Right.
and it's got to be fixed, before that airplane flies. So again, the biggest thing is safety, but still getting the job done in a timely fashion, for the sake of the passengers. Yeah.
So for all of us, of course, you mentioned MEL, minimum equipment list.
Yep.
That's a concept that all of us, whether we're flying something with a prop on the front and
True.
or even a glider, that
Yep.
it's the minimum that equipment that you need in order to conduct your flight. And
Exactly.
so I assume if you can meet that, you're basically just dealing with paperwork and operational restrictions. If you can't, you've got to fix something. Is that right?
That's correct. Yep, exactly. So the MEL book would tell you, ours is very detailed. It has, how many systems that are on board, how many systems need to be operating, and how long it can be broken for, and what you have to do in order to release that airplane, whether it be pulling a circuit breaker, whether it be taking off a cannon plug and capping it, whether it be locking out a valve. There's so many different things that you can do to follow that MEL. But it spells it out to the T. But yeah, that'll allow you to operate the airplane in a safely manner and still fly it with that system potentially being broken still.
How frequently, when aircraft are waiting for dispatch and you've got a problem, are you able to actually end up repairing something on the line?
It, it's kind of really the roll of the dice, because I mean things break all the time. I mean, even things like light bulbs, position lights. If it's daytime, you can hook it if it's not working, and still fly the airplane as long as it's daytime, and the MEL will spell that out, daytime operations only and stuff, and which makes sense. So I'd probably have to say it's a roll of the dice. Just kind of depends on what you get, and what the situation is. There's so many different variables, because as a line mechanic, you're out there with the airplane, but there's people behind the scenes like maintenance control that you may talk to, and dispatchers that are dealing with what's going on, for flight superintendents that are in charge of the flight. Then you have people looking at spares. Hey, if we can't fix this thing, can we move this, these people and to another gate, because we have a spare airplane that's not assigned to flight, and we can move them there. And there's just so much that goes on behind the scenes, and
Wow.
that's honestly, a lot of times when I conduct these classes, I always try to make it a point, because when I first started line maintenance up at JFK, I thought, just me being the small-minded person at the time, not seeing the big picture of the airline, I'm thinking line maintenance is it. Yeah, I know there's guys working in a hangar somewhere, and maybe some people working in an office somewhere, but this is it. This is where I work, and JFK is one of the biggest and busiest airports in the world, and this is it. And then when I got down to Atlanta, you see all these little shops and all these little, you got hangar maintenance here, you got engine maintenance there. It's just a whole entire world. And if someone isn't doing their job, the whole company takes a hit, no matter what. If they aren't, if they're not putting out engines in a timely fashion, an engine shop, well then when I need an engine on the line to replace one, if I need to, well then I don't have that engine. And it's just a ripple effect. Everybody has to do their job in order for the large machine to work. It's actually really remarkable how everything gets done.
Wow. Is there any stories in particular or instances in particular that come to mind of anything? I have, you always have visions when you're sitting in 23D, of course, that someone's out there jacking up the tire and replacing it before you leave the gate. But I mean,
Oh yeah. Oh well. I mean, I've done that, yeah, for sure. A lot of times maybe it'd be a quick turn, and basically a quick turn is, airplane comes in and it leaves, they deplane it, and it's supposed to leave like in another 40 minutes or so, quick turn sometimes under an hour. And, when it hits the gate, the flight crew may say, hey, I was doing a walk around, and, that tire is showing cord or whatever, and they're loading people up, and, you know, we got to get that tire changed, and that's just what it is, and it's crazy sometimes, not in a bad way, obviously, but it's just doing what you can to keep the machine going,
all right, last geeky question on all this stuff for you, because I can't help it. But a lot of times you're listening in and people are waiting for paperwork. Is it electronic or is it actually paperwork when you're dealing with a release of something, whether it's an MEL or whether it's something else that you're dealing to get a flight out?
It's both. So you have the logbook that stays in the airplane with all the maintenance stuff, and all that's written. So the flight crew would write up whatever's going on with it, and what flight number, what day, and all that other stuff, and we have to go in and write. But then on the electronic side of it, once we pull that log page out, that gets entered into a database. So that's the electronic side of it. So releasing the airplane happens two different ways. Of course, once you're working on it, you'll fix the item or MEL it, whatever the case is, and then that next page, you'll sign the top of the logbook releasing it. So the pilots have that for them, and then when you go on the computer, it happens basically again, but just digitally.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for indulging me with that. I want to fast forward to your personal flying now, because of course you're not just a mechanic, and not just mechanic for Delta. You're also, of course, a pilot, a CFI, an aerobatics pilot. Tell me the story for that, because for the story you told me so far of just getting to where you did, that was already kind of a pinch me thing. How did you find your way into the cockpit?
And really, that's a weird deal. So, not fast forward, rewind to back, when I was a kid. Like I said, I wanted to, get into flying, and then I ended up going to an aviation maintenance school. Worked out just fine. That's why we're talking, right? Because if I didn't go there, I might not know who you are, and vice versa. But long story short, what happened was I was working as a line mechanic here in Atlanta. And I go up, and there was an MD-88 that had some type of issue that I was sent out to go talk to the pilot about. And I walk into the flight deck, and there's this pilot, and he looks at me. He's like, "Man, you look kind of young." And I was like, "Well, not as young as you think, but yeah, what's up?" So we end up talking about whatever issue he had or whatever the case is, and it wasn't a big deal. I forget exactly what the issue was, but he said, "Man, you should think about flying." And I said, "Well." And I said exactly to him, I said, "I think that ship has sailed." And he said, "No," he said, "a lot of us old folks gonna be retiring soon. So you might want to think about it." Okay, whatever. And off he went. And then maybe about 2 weeks after or so, I was sent out to another MD-88, and it was the same guy. He's like, "Hey, you started flying yet?" And I'm like, "No, of course not, man." I said, "Man, I tell you, that ship has sailed." He's like, "Man, I'm really, you should just do it. Give it a shot, try it." I'm like, whatever. And off he went. And then got called out again, maybe about a month after. And I go out, it's the same guy. The guy's name is Dave Buck. And Dave and I is like, "Man, I know you haven't started flying, probably not, but this has got to be a sign." I said, "All right, man, give me your number." So I took his number, and I said, "How do I do this thing?" And he's like, "Well, I put out a couple of feelers on Facebook, and I'll let you know what happens." And he ended up texting me maybe 2 days after and said, "Hey, I got a guy for you. He said he'll love to take you flying," and da da da. And that gentleman's name is Glenn Fink. And I went down to the airport. He had a Cessna 182 and said, "Yep, let's do a discovery flight." I hopped in, and it was great. The setup was perfect. He knew what he was doing. And he took me up. It was the sunset, cotton candy skies. I'm like, "Oh man, this is," the air was nice and smooth. I said, "Man." So, we landed. He said, so what do you think?" I said, "Man, it was awesome," And I said, "When do I start?" And the rest was history. I started flying in January of 2017, and I got my private in 2018, in May of 2018. So it took me longer because I was traveling for work and stuff like that. So sometimes I'd be away for 2 weeks at a time. So of course, when I come back, it's like, "Hey, do you remember that thing I showed you last time we flew?" And I'm like, "No, I don't." So I have to spend a couple of lessons backwards to go forwards. The deal. So, but yeah, that's actually how I got into flying. And then the aerobatic deal, thanks to Glenn, I just finished up a flight. And he was pulling his RV-8 out of the hangar and said, "Hey, you ever been in an RV-8?" I said, "Nope." He said, "You want to go?" I said, "Sure." So I hopped in the back. He was up front, and we took off. And I'm thinking I'm just going off for a ride. He's like, "Hey, have you ever done a roll before?" I'm like, "A roll? Like rolling like upside down?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "No." He said, "Okay, watch this." He pushed the nose up. He threw it over. And I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's great." I still have it on video on my phone. I said, "Oh, that was amazing," And I said, "Can I try?" He said, "Yeah." So he walked me through it. And then I landed. I said, "Hey, can you teach me how to do that aerobatic stuff?" He said, "Me?" He said, "Hell no, I can't teach you how to do that." He said, "I don't even like it." I said, "Well, what'd you do that for then?" He said, "Well, just showing you something different. So he's like, for that, you're gonna have to go seek somebody out. So I started making phone calls and stuff like that. I finally had somebody willing to train me for a little bit. A guy named Mike Fitzpatrick out of Noonan down here, and he took me up, and the rest was history. Then I said, man, I got to get an airplane now because this stuff is getting a little bit too expensive. Aerobatic flying ain't no joke, man. So I had to find me something, and I ended up buying a Decathlon, a fixed pitch, 150 horse, and that's what I'm rebuilding now. So.
Oh man. So all
Yeah.
it took was, let me make sure I understand the story correctly. So there was someone who really wanted you to fly, and so they kept breaking their MD-88 and keeping people on the ground so they could, when they knew you were on call, so they could get you into the cockpit and talk you into flying.
I'm telling you, that guy Dave Buck, man, he's something else.
So if you're
Yep.
wondering why you were sitting at the gate on that Delta flight, it was because it was worth it, all right? He was busy trying to inspire a young man to get his license.
Telling you. Good old Dave Buck, man. He's fantastic. I thank God for Dave Buck, because if I never bumped into Dave, I probably wouldn't be flying. So.
That's awesome. One of the things I really find wonderful about general aviation is that it seems to be the least exclusive community in the way that it operates, meaning we want to make more pilots, we want people to come in, but we have a problem because we don't have good outreach and
Right.
the message doesn't seem to get out. So it's almost like the door's open and we're waiting, but we can't seem to reach. And this seems to be something that you spend a lot of your time focused on. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, as far as spreading the word, I feel like that's why I'm here. I feel like that's why I got into flying. I didn't get into flying to make money. I didn't, I had no aspirations to become an airline pilot when I started. I was just doing it for the fun. And I'm still doing it for the fun. But, as far as, getting the word out there, I started putting stuff on my Instagram, started flying and making, some interesting videos, just kind of me doing some landings and, a couple other things. And when I got into aerobatic flying, posting that, obviously that's a different dynamic. But people, like especially African Americans and stuff, they started kind of looking a little bit like, man, what the hell is this guy doing? He's upside down doing this crazy stuff. I had never seen that before. So I would get messages like, hey, how do I get into flying? How do I do this? How do I do that? Where do you go? Who do I talk to? And then I started realizing that I had a bigger responsibility, in this space, as far as spreading the word, because you go to a lot of Oshkosh and Sun and Fun, a lot of these, well, of course those are the two big flyings, but I mean even smaller ones, just around that I've stopped in, I've seen different events and stuff like that. I mean, just the diversity is just not there, and it's just not. So I'm using my social media channels to do that. I'm trying to answer questions. I'm trying to, bring people with me, post about air shows, post about these flyings just to get people out. And, it is helping a lot. But yeah, I mean, there's so much work to do in the space as far as just from a diversity standpoint,
Yeah.
and I'm not just talking about, African Americans. I mean, just people in color in general. I mean, you go to any air show, a big flying, I mean, just the majority of the population is, all white, so it's
Right.
just there's a lot of work to be done.
I've always, I've worked for large companies, I've been independent, and it's always fascinating to me because inevitably there's always a study that gets done through a marketing firm of the, demographics of general aviation or of aviation in general, which is really, you spend the money, you go through it all, and it also always comes back to the same thing, right? Which is like old white guys. So like, welcome to the crowd. But
Right.
it's not a field that's what it we really want it. It's not that way because we want to turn people away. It's that way for reasons that need to change and that can change if we
Right.
can have the outreach. Um,
Right. Right. Yeah. I
I
mean,
applaud the work that you're doing. I think we need to do as much as possible in that area.
yeah, 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 and you know, it's not an overnight thing. I mean, you know, it's resources, it's who you know. I mean, just, you know, because honestly, like before Dave Buck, you know, if somebody would have came up to me and said, "Hey, you know, uh, I want to know how to fly. Where do I go to go do it?" And I tell them, I don't know, maybe ask a gate agent or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You know, if you see a guy in a hat and he's got like these bars, ask him. You know, because we don't know. You know, I mean, just you know, we just don't know in my community. Whereas, you know, on the other side, you know, somebody who has a cousin, who has an uncle, you know, there's some type of connection there. You know, but you know, in the African American community, you know, I mean, you could just forget about it. So, so I get a lot of questions because people don't know. So I try to put people in, you know, in the right, point people in the right direction. Hey, you know, what airport do you live by, or where do you live? Okay, well, Google, you know, flying clubs and flight schools in your area, and you know, ask for a discovery flight. Like I have these conversations at least, you know, 5 to 8 a day, just trying to point people in the right direction. So I know it is making an impact. But you know, like I said, when I go to, I just came back from Oshkosh, and I'm always looking. I'm like, man, it's just so much work, so much more work to do, because you know I'm here, and you know I am having fun in the space, and I'm, you know, doing, you know, I'm making personal progress, and I have my own personal goals. But you know, I understand that it's bigger than me, because when it's all said and done, you know, I want to be able to go to an air show 20 years from now and have an actual diverse crowd, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's just, you know, every day is a new goal. Every day is working on the same goal also. So it's just pressing on. It's just pressing on. But you know, there are a lot of things, like I mentioned, resources. I mean, people just don't know. I mean, if you ask, you know, the majority, I mean, they don't know anybody who flies. So they have no clue where to start. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
What do you find in terms of, if you look at the problem of not having aviation represented in the way that the world is represented for population, in your experience, how do you find that being kind of the fault of the industry of not reaching out, perhaps just the communities not being aware and getting there, or downright just basic racial bias and prejudice blocking people from getting into it? What's your experience been?
I don't think it's racial bias at all. I just think, you know, from where the problem stems from is just available resources. So, I mean, you know, aviation is an expensive game. So unfortunately, you got to have money to play. Not money to attend, but if you want to buy an airplane, or if you want to, you know, improve your panel, or whatever the case is, I mean, it, it's a nonstop cost. Even putting gas in the airplane, and you know, a standard airplane, it drinks 9 gallons an hour, single engine deal. You know, I mean, it costs money. And unfortunately, in my community, I mean, that's just not a resource that's available. You know, so that's really where the problem stems from. Is just, we just don't have the money to do it. So I mean, I can point people in the right direction, but then it's like, okay, great, this is great, I'm gonna, you know, ask for this discovery fly, you know, okay, cool, I did it. Okay, well, now I want to sign up for classes. Okay, well, it's going to cost you like $250 an hour. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, how many hours do I need? Like 5? Like, oh, well, 40 legally, but you know, the national average. Oh, wait a minute, I can't, you know. And you know, that's the problem right there. So trying to solve that, trying to make flying, you know, affordable, is the thing that's going to change it. And that's a whole different animal in itself. So that's where scholarships and certain things come into play. And you know, I plan on, you know, offering my own scholarships and trying to, you know, you know, maybe do anywhere from 2 to 5, you know, private students a year. You know, I plan on starting my own nonprofit, and trying to, you know, solve this problem. Because again, you know, you can point them in the right direction, but you know, it's all, you know, it's almost like a, like catch 22. You know, you spread the word, then they get out there, then they want to get involved and realize how expensive that it is, and then they like, well, you know, I don't belong in this space, right?
Right.
So so it's a very interesting puzzle to figure out, but it can be done. And I have friends who who are friends now who I've never met in real life who found me on social media, said, hey, I'm going to start taking lessons, and then like 3 years after the fact, hey, thanks for your help, blah blah blah, I just got my private, I'm like so excited, I plan on, so I know it is working. But again, the cost is the problem. But I mean, everybody struggles with that, right? No matter if you're rich or you're poor, you still have to spend the money. Of course, there's a big gap between rich and poor, but the common thing is you still have to spend money, regardless.
Right.
So just
Well, of
trying to,
course,
yeah.
yeah, of course, there's two different things, right? We've got the recreational aviation, those that just want to, weekend flying for $100 hamburger, where you're spending the money and it's because it's disposable income and you're doing it for fun. But as a
Yeah.
profession,
Mhm.
and having it as an opportunity, that's the idea that you have to get over this hurdle of being able to spend the money so that you can go into the profession.
Right.
And it seems to me that we are making some inroads on the technical side because the cost of technical schools maybe is manageable enough that someone can see the payback
Yeah.
after they graduate and get a job, and maybe even get a signing bonus that pays off some of what people have invested in. But that's not there yet, it doesn't seem, in being a professional pilot.
Yeah, it's tough, because so for example, some flight schools, you got to invest 90 grand or something like that to go all the way, and it's like, whoa, wait a minute, it's a lot of money. In my personal opinion, I can't speak for everybody's own personal situation, but I think if that's what you want to do, I think now's the time to do it, just because they're hiring so much. So you do see, yeah, you got to spend 90 or take out a loan for 90 grand. It's like, oh, wait a minute, that's a lot of money. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, because I mean, I'm at work every day, and I see how much pilots, we're bringing in. And I mean, that's just us. I mean, everywhere. I mean, the general aviation side, of course, there's corporate aviation. Of course, there's, the airlines. I mean, everybody's hurting. So you can fit in somewhere. You spend that money, you get all your ratings in a year or less than that, and just kind of put yourself out there. I think, me personally, I think it's worth it. But you don't know what everybody's financial situation is. So I mean, it's a hard sell, regardless of how you look at it, because it's not free. But there are tons of scholarships out there also. Try to tell folks, there are options. There's a lot of money I see being left on the table because people don't know about it. So there are ways to get around it. If you do enough research, if you ask enough questions, and you ask the right people, there are ways to try to make it as affordable as you possibly can.
Yeah. What about schools like the one that you went to? How did your family find out about it? And do you think that that's a path in terms of, like, in place of high school, that can help people along exactly the same lines you followed?
So the reason why I started smirking when you asked how did they find out about it. So how they actually found out about it was, I failed coming out of 7th to 8th grade. I failed about 6 classes, right? So and this is a true story. So growing up, I played basketball. I was pretty decent, for my age and my size. But I'm not terribly tall. I'm average height. I'm 5'9", 5'10" on a good day when I'm wearing my work boots. But but I would go to these basketball camps. I do pretty well, and some of the basketball camp counselors and organizers, hey, talk to my mom, like, hey, he's pretty good, why don't you come to our high school? We win all these city championships and stuff like that. We think he'll do pretty well. He'd be challenged and da da da. And she said, nope, he failed 6 classes. If I got to pay for that school, sounds like a private school, which it was. He's not going. He's gonna have to find a public school to go to. Okay, great. So I get this book in New York. They give you this book with all the high schools in it, in all the different boroughs, and it's all like color coded and stuff, right? So I'm flipping there, crying my eyes out, because I wanted to go to Xaverian High School in Brooklyn and play basketball and and be one of the best in the city and stuff like that. And I flip in the page and I get to Queens and I see Aviation High School, and I stop right there and I'm like, So I ended up, in New York, you have to make a list of high schools, in order of, which ones you want to go to. So I put it first. I'm like, well, got no other option, and I put it first and I ended up getting in. So that's how they found out about it. And that's a true story because I had no clue it existed until I failed 6 classes and until I had to go in that book. So if I wasn't, right, if I didn't suck so bad at school early on, right, then I wouldn't even be in this space. So it's really interesting how things come together. I would have gone on, I'd have played basketball, I'd have gone to that school. She'd be like, oh yeah, sure, he's a spectacular student. Of course I'm gonna pay for private school for him, right? Yeah, go play basketball. I'd have probably got a nice little small scholarship to go on to college, and then I'd be out there in the workforce doing God knows what. But because I failed those 6 classes, brought me here. So it's very interesting. So again, that school saved my life. I say it all the time because it did, because I don't know what the hell I'd be doing otherwise. But going back to answer your question, I think there's another school like mine. I believe it's in Seattle or something like that, where they integrate, high school and the vocational side of it. Vocational side of aviation. And I can't remember if it's a maintenance deal or they get you started like flying earlier or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but I do believe there should be more schools like mine. Yeah, more schools like my high school, and it's produced a lot of technicians, of course, also tons of pilots out of that school. I mean, everybody, gets their license like, oh, I think I'll start flying. And, they go into the flight ops side of it and, super successful. I bump into people all the time at work. Oh yeah, I went to aviation. Oh yeah, what year were you? I'm 80 something. Oh, I'm 2005. It's just, it's nonstop, and we're all over the world too. So it's kind of cool.
So that was a public school.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Public school with not only an A&P program, but even a flight school program.
Well, not so my school did not have a flight school program, just an A&P program. There was a flying club that Mr. Bongiorno used to do, and he used to take, kids out to Republic Airport and get them like, a half-hour flight here, an hour flight there. But that was kind of like his deal. But the school, I mean, has an FA certified maintenance program, and it is a public school. So people ask me, "Oh, how much did you pay for your A&P?" I'm like, I don't know, like $300, and it's the truth because I only I only had to pay for the practical exam. That was it. That was it. So it's absolutely crazy. I mean, yeah, seriously, I paid like $300 or $400 for my A&P.
I mean, it certainly seems to me it's self-evident that is what we need with a looming crisis, not just a pilot crisis, but a massive mechanic crisis that will benefit the entire country, if not the world. We need to have that as an option. We need to have more of those public schools that can do what you just said.
I agree. I agree. There's just so much more room for, I mean, mechanics, pilots, air traffic controllers. I mean, the list goes on and on. There's just not enough of these schools out there. Yeah, I think it'd be great. I think it'd be great because it's good. I mean, you have a lot of people that are really good with their hands, and it's a great career. I mean, I got to travel the world at 19. I'm going down to Florida, hanging out in West Palm Beach with my cousin and stuff like that. Like, what am I doing here? I mean, I've had so many moments like, am I dreaming? Especially early on. I mean, I couldn't believe it. I'm like, man, I went to high school and here I am working and Delta's my favorite airline. I mean, even growing up as a kid, I shook the table a little bit, but I love Delta, and I still do. So it's like really a dream come true that I ended up, where I would have wanted to be in the first place, so.
Wow. And again, we touched on this earlier, but one of the things that I think is kind of lost in this is it's very easy for people to look at and kind of separate these two worlds of the professional world, whether it be going to college and getting a job, or whether it be going into the professional as a pilot in an airline, versus going to a technical college and learning, quote, a trade.
Yeah.
In aviation, it seems like those are not completely separate things, that you, as you've shown with your career, it's seamless. These you can move from swinging a wrench to training people to managing people to being a VP somewhere. Like this, the sky's the limit if we can
It
get
is.
more people into that world.
It is absolutely, and yeah, like I said, there's just so much space, and yeah, I mean, you can come in as a mechanic and like, you know what, that flying thing was kind of cool. Let me just transition over to that. I mean, because once you're there, I mean, there's just so many different. Like at one point, I actually thought about being an air traffic controller. Just like, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. But then I heard like, people having tough times down in Oak City and it kind of being rough. I said, I don't know if I want to leave my gig. I'm kind of enjoying this now, because if I don't make it over there, then I'm kind of out of a job, and then I'll be looking to come back. I'm like, nah, let me not do that. So that kind of came and went real quick. But yeah, aviation's it's such a very, very, very cool and almost endless space. I mean, there's so much stuff you can get into. And you see it when you go to these big fly-ins, right? I mean, you just take whatever airplane you might be flying or whatever, and then you now with this whole drone thing going on, I was just up at Oshkosh and I'm walking and it looks like a dang UFO. I'm like, what is that? You know what I mean? It was just the little black car thing with all the little propellers.
The black fly, the
Yeah, it was just
opener.
buzzing by. I'm like, what is that? You know what I mean? It's just crazy. I mean, there's just so much stuff that you can get into, so much stuff you can learn. All the seminars to go to learn about different things, all the workshops like the fabric workshop, ironing and learning how to shrink fabric, and I mean just all this stuff is just endless. There's so much information, and that's what makes it extremely cool, in my
Yeah.
personal, because there's literally something there for everybody. If you like really fast stuff, you got the jets buzzing by doing the air show. If you like the slow stuff, there's that too. If you like drones, there's that too. If you like to go work with your hands, there's workshops for that. If you like to go and sit seminars and stuff, it's just so much. At some points it's almost overwhelming, how much stuff is going on.
Oshkosh is certainly overwhelming to say the
Oh
least.
gosh, it's unreal. Yeah, so I mean, I'm just happy to be here. I'm really happy to be here. I had no idea when I stepped foot in my high school that I would, be here today. I had no clue. So,
Right.
but it's cool. Just enjoying the journey.
Well, you are on a trajectory now that is quite inspiring because you're working on putting your Citabria back, your decathlon, excuse me, in upgrading that. And if I understand correctly, your goal is to eventually be an air show performer at shows like that and help inspire people by being in front of the crowd. And
Yeah,
that's I can't wait to see that. Tell me about that journey.
yeah. It's being upside down is cool as hell. Let's just start there, right? It's fantastic. When I go to air shows, I watch, people like Mike Goulian and Rob Holland and Greg Kuntz and just to name a few. And I look at the crowd, Skip Stewart. Oh goodness! And I look at the reaction of the crowd. It's just and the feeling I get, and I look around and say, hey, do you feel that too? You know what I mean? Did you see that? Are you feeling the same thing that I'm feeling? And I just wanted to be a part of that. And then also, I mean, you go to an air show right now, there's no African American performers. It's just a very underrepresented space. And I want to help change that because that will be able to bring that diverse crowd out. So it's a lot bigger. The mission that I have is a lot bigger than just going up there and just making circles with smoke and shaking hands and kissing babies and stuff like that. um, it's really trying to make an impact that matters. Not to say that what Mike and the rest of them do don't matter, because I mean, I see the little smiles on the kids' faces and stuff like that. They're all, so of course that matters. Hopefully they're making pilots, out there. But I really want to bring my community out and let them know that this space exists and they can live in it too. So that's why I'm here.
Well, that's so important. I mean, it's been proven, it's been demonstrated. If you don't see yourself on TV, in the movies, in your heroes, then how can you aspire to be that?
Right, exactly. And I mean, a lot of I mean, even, some companies, of course I'm on social media all the time, and every now and again I look at, some of these big companies, and seeing if they're promoting diversity. And I'm very grateful for the ones that do, because it's very important. Because I mean, I buy something, some type of product, and I go on social media and I'm scrolling, oh, this is great, this is the product that I just got or whatever, and it's like, man, I don't see any of I don't see any of me on here. It's kind of strange, but that's what happens, and you can't, you know, you can't help but not think about it, when you're in that position. It's just something that you just can't help, and people think about it, so I really, am appreciative for the companies that do promote diversity, because it does help. People do need to, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. People need to see, especially get into the space that they want to be in. They want to see that representation so they can feel comfortable. They know it's attainable, and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, and I want to give a proper shout out to that, because we were both introduced, because we were both you and I were featured in Lightspeed's Path to Your Dreams ebook, which everyone can get if they go to Lightspeed Aviation's website, and that's where I saw your story, and that's where got really tied in with it, and that matters a lot. And of course, you're also sponsored by Avidyne. And Avidyne obviously works a huge supporter of SocialFlight, and equipping our T-51 Mustang behind us, and doing wonderful work with you. So it matters when companies get behind folks like yourself and make a difference.
It does. And listen, I'll take $1, man. Any little bit helps, man. I'll take a smile, I'll take a Coke, you know what I mean? But I'll tell you what, the community itself has been very welcoming. Mike Goulian's been fantastic. Greg Kuntz has been fantastic. Steph Strickland has been, like, amazing, helping me out, and, kind of getting me in the proper spaces and answering questions that I may have and stuff like that. So I've never had any, pushback on anything. I mean, just like you said in the beginning, this community has just been so welcoming, as a whole, and I'm super appreciative for that. So it's been great.
It's absolutely wonderful. Well, Mel, I don't want to end without sending people to make sure they know where to follow you. It is Mel the Traveler on Instagram. Any other ways that people can follow you?
Yeah, Instagram is really where I live for the most part at the moment. But when my airplane is done, I also have a YouTube channel, and I'll be putting a lot more stuff on there. And it's the same, Mel the Traveler on YouTube. But yeah, Instagram right now is mainly where I live. But as the airplane continues to get closer to completion, I'll be dropping some YouTube stuff. I'll start living on that space as well. So
That's awesome. Well, Melvin Williams, thank you so much for joining us this evening here on SocialFlight Live. Your story is inspiring, and the work that you do is as well. And I just can't wait to see what you do next.
thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it. I've had a lot of fun, man. I'm almost kind of that the time is kind of running out, but it's all right. Maybe we'll figure out another episode down the line or something.
We will. There is no doubt, especially when you get that plane in the air.
Man, I'm telling you.
I want to see more about that. So I'd love to have you back in the future. I really appreciate it.
Oh man, likewise. I appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. Well, you have a wonderful evening.
You too.
Thank you.
All
Good
right.
night.
Night.
And to those of you out there, thank you so much for taking time out of your evening to join us here on SocialFlight Live. We will be back next week, next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with Greg Hughes of Vans Aircraft. If you didn't get a chance to see the RV-15 High Wing at Oshkosh, if you didn't make it to that show, or even if you did, this is the opportunity to get lots of information about what's going on behind the scenes with the RV-15 and all sorts of other inside news from Greg. coming out of Van's Aircraft. That's next Tuesday night, September 6th. And then the following Tuesday, September 13th at 8 p.m., I am thrilled to have the first female Thunderbirds pilot back with us. Nicole Malachowski will be joining us. We're going to talk about pilot health. She has some challenges that have occurred in her life that she continues to fight against and has made it through as well. And it's going to be a very inspiring and informative episode for anyone who has ever wondered what would happen if they face challenges with their medical or the future of their flying. So be sure to tune in for that Tuesday, September 13th at 8 p.m. with Thunderbirds pilot Nicole Malachowski. And on Tuesday, September 20th, Lightspeed Aviation founder Alan Schrader will be joining us with some very special news out of Lightspeed. Until next time, again, thank you so much for joining us here on Social Flight Live, and I wish you all blue skies.